I received a review copy of Kings and Creatures from the publisher, so thanks to Zoch Verlag. Attract heroes, kings and mythical beasts to your castle. And of course you're going to want the best stuff, but take care because if you're too greedy, you'll be pushed back in the queue and it could be a while until you get to play again. Kings and Creatures is a simple card drafting game with a unique twist on turn order, and that's the hook. I'm Adam Porter. I design games and I review games on this channel with a particular focus on their success as a commercial product. Kings and Creatures is a small box card game for 2 to 6 players from designer Nikko Böhnke and publisher Zoch Verlag. I love Zoch Verlag for their constant experimentation with game mechanisms and components. Kings and Creatures is a more conventional card game than many in Zoch's catalogue. It's an exercise in set collection with a neat twist in the drafting system, and as such it could sit alongside Sushi Go, Go Nuts for Donuts, or Cat Lady as an approachable card game for families. Kings and Creatures lasts 5 rounds, and the goal is to collect glory points by gathering sets of cards. Turn order is dictated by the number at the top of the last card each player selected. The player with the lowest number plays first. Players select cards from a face-up display and add them to their castle. And this continues until all players have left the round. The player leaves the round when they've played 3 cards or whenever they select a card with a number that's lower than their previously played card. Hence, it's a good idea to leave a round with a low number to ensure that you play early in the next round. At the end of each round, players compare the number of heroes they've collected with their right and left neighbour, and if you've beaten your neighbours, you score points. At the end of the game, players score their other sets. Treasure simply awards the points showing on the card. Mythical creatures score highest when you have lots of different types in your display. The king cards indicate a colour, and if you have more cards of that colour than your left or right neighbour, you score points. Legends score points if you've collected cards matching the colours shown on the legend card. And after 5 rounds, the highest scorer wins. Now, I was sent this game by the publisher and I knew nothing about it, so I got stuck into the game with no preconceptions other than my appreciation for Zoch Verlag, which always means I tend to go in with an expectation of having fun. I'm not sure that the cover would have attracted me if it was from another publisher. The artwork by Stefan Lawrence is charming, but the theme of kings, castles and medieval creatures is a little bit uninspired. Now, I'm an advocate of using familiar settings to prevent barriers to entry, so I certainly don't think this is a fatal flaw, but some sort of twist in the storytelling would have lifted the appeal of the product for me. I was keen to play Kings and Creatures, but it took some time to rise to the top of my unplayed pile and to make it to the table. The rules were very easy to learn from the rule sheet and they're very brief. That said, the turn order mechanism is a little bit unintuitive. It's easy to explain, but it subverts one of the pillars of tabletop games, the clockwise turn order. And as such, players who are only familiar with the classics could find the changing turn order confusing. Certainly that was the experience of some of the less experienced players that I've introduced the game to. Gameplay is fun. It's a simple set collection exercise and that's always satisfying. But the turn order system means that you constantly have to check whose turn it is next. And with larger player counts, that means checking the card values in front of up to 6 different players. This happens over and over again, and it can become a little bit tedious. You also end up waiting quite a long time for your turn to come around if you bowed out of a round early or chose a particularly high valued card. The flow of the game just isn't as steady as some other drafting games. What we have here is essentially a card game implementation of the time track, which has become popular in European board games like Glenmore, Tokaido and Patchwork. In those games, the players furthest back on a track plays first, which can result in some players taking multiple turns before others get to take theirs. This works well in a strategic board game because players can fill the gap between turns by considering their next move. Set collection card games usually clip along at a pace, but that isn't the case in Kings and Creatures. At times, the turn order mechanism does feel a little bit disjointed. In my reviews, I score games between 1 and 3 points for 5 different categories, and each point climbs the game 1 rung up my engagement ladder. 10 points is enough to sit at the top of the ladder and it indicates a real favourite with me. The first category is thematic immersion, and Kings and Creatures scores 0 here. There's no link between the setting and the game mechanisms, and as nice as they are, the images really could be of anything. Player interaction is a strength in the game. Players need to be very aware of the value of cards in front of other players and what cards they're likely to choose from the central pool, as well as ensuring that they're beating one or both neighbours in their heroes. If a player has a king, they're also going to want to ensure that they've got more matching coloured cards than their neighbours. And you really can't afford to let any single player gather too many mythical creatures or they'll run away with the game. There's no direct interaction in terms of take-that mechanisms or opportunities for negotiation, but this game is far from solitary. Kings and Creatures is pretty straightforward to play, and it never becomes stressful. And that's great for a breezy activity, but it does lack tension or drama, so I'm scoring it quite low in this category. That said, I do think there's some skill to playing this game well, so I'm going to give it a 1. The game offers pretty good feedback though. Your earlier actions do impact constantly as the game progresses. The heroes score over and over again with increasing impact. Your chosen cards directly affect the order of play in later rounds, and there's a good sense of accumulation with the mythical beasts. And finally, for meaningful choices, the game does quite well in comparison to other games in its class. There really is quite a lot to consider with each card pick. All the usual scoring and blocking opportunities that you'd see in a card drafting game like Sushi Go, but with the added complexity of manipulating turn order in your favour. The game will definitely be won or lost based on your in-game choices. So the overall score of 7 isn't quite enough to push Kings and Creatures to the top of my engagement ladder, but it's not bad either. It's not the first game that I'd pull off the shelf for a casual audience looking for a simple card game, but for those looking for an evolution from simple fare like Sushi Go or Go Nuts for Donuts, this is a nice next step. Moving on to my product design checklist. Is the game innovative? Well, yes, there's one standout mechanism here and it does feel fresh. I've seen similar mechanisms in the time tracks of several modern Euro games, but it isn't overused, and this is the first time that I've seen an effective card game implementation. It may not be the most intuitive mechanism out there, but it is different and it is intriguing. Does the game live up to its promises? Well, I think part of the problem is that the game doesn't really make much of a promise beyond being a simple, portable card game with a generic theme. The package sets fairly low expectations and then exceeds them. Does the game fulfill a need? Well, no, I don't think so. There are plenty of games of this ilk. That said, they're all pretty insubstantial affairs, and players are likely to tire of any simple card drafting game relatively quickly with repeated plays, so there's always room for more. Kings and Creatures introduces a fresh new mechanism, and this has value for players and for designers, broadening our vocabulary of game mechanisms which we can incorporate into our own games. I certainly learned a few new tricks playing this game, and that's something that I always appreciate. All that remains is to plot Kings and Creatures on my idea execution matrix, and best-selling commercial products tend to have an incredible central concept with outstanding execution, pushing them up into the red-orange section of the grid, while the less profitable titles sit in the blue section. Kings and Creatures is a neat idea, a novel mechanism with few bells and whistles. But card drafting games are always popular. The execution is fine, with some nice artwork and a clear rule set, and there are one or two areas where the execution's a little bit lacking. The deck needs to be adjusted for different player counts, which means that each game starts with a bit of a tedious trawl through the pile to remove various cards. The treasure, king and legend cards each use a different symbol for victory points, which makes the iconography harder to interpret than it could have been. But these are minor points in an otherwise very approachable package. Kings and Creatures edges into the green section. It's a nice little product which will inevitably be overlooked by many. But if you're on the hunt for a simple set collection card game with a fresh twist, this would be a good option. I'd love to hear of your own suggestions of card games with unique twists that you think I should check out. Let me know in the comments, and as always, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. All the best.